each class that I will take here, okay, I will share the recording also on YouTube, so that you can refer to those videos, recorded videos, whenever you need to. And by the way, I have already recorded and uploaded the this lectures, because this is also being taught in our department, in the ATC department, Electronics and Telecommunication department. The subject name is VLSI design. Okay, and more or less the syllabus was same. So if you go to YouTube, okay, and I will share the link. Don't worry, I will share the link. I have uploaded the complete playlist. Okay, but this is just for your reference. Okay, this is just for your reference. This one. Okay. So here I have uploaded around 30 videos that covers around most of the syllabus, around 80, 85, 90% of the syllabus. Okay. So this you can refer whenever you require. Okay. So this I will share. I will also cover the syllabus. Okay. This is just for your reference. I'm sharing with you. Okay. So that you can find it at your convenience. Okay. So I will share this in your VLSI group. Okay. Okay. This is one thing, and but there are some differences in the syllabus, because since the department is different, yours is triple E, and this I used to teach it for electronics and telecommunication. So there would be small differences in the syllabus and topics. Do not worry about that. Just most of the things are same. Okay, and uh, I want to ask to the students, all the students, that I know you have studied basic electronics. Okay, have you studied analog electronics subject? And anyone can answer. Have you studied this subject, analog electronics or digital electronics?
Yes, sir.
So you have studied both of these subjects, analog and digital electronics, both, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, 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 right. That is good, because that will help you in this subject. Okay, so this VLSI subject, basically, you can think of it as an extension to those subjects. Okay, so this becomes a more advanced version of analog electronics and digital electronics. You can think of it like this. And this is the syllabus. This is the syllabus for your subject, I think. This VLSI theory and design. Okay, this is the code BELP E503. I think this is a professional elective subject. Okay, right? And it contains 5 modules. Okay, so today I will discuss about these general things about the syllabus, and some related content about this. Okay, and you can ask your doubts anytime when you have one. Okay, so module 1, 2, 3, then 4 and 5. Okay, and there are 2 textbooks assigned here. Textbook 1 is Sung Mo Kang by Kang. Okay, The name is CMOS Digital Integrated Circuits, and the second book is about programming by Perry, Douglas Perry. Okay, VSDL programming. I think you will not need this book much. Okay, okay. And there are some reference books also. The first one is from Rabe. This is Digital Integrated Circuits, Design Perspective. Okay, and the second book is by Giger. Giger. Uh, the name is VLSI Design Techniques for Analog and Digital Circuits. Okay, so I think most of the time we would be following this one, textbook number one, this one, and reference book number one. So you can make a note of it that this Kang, okay, this book and this book, Rabe. These two books would be the main books that we will follow for this syllabus. Okay, and we will also refer to some other resources from internet, and maybe from these two books also, from other two books. I will tell from time to time. Okay, where to refer for what topics. Okay, I will tell about that. So basically, if you look from an overview point of view, the first module covers about the introduction and historical perspective, and this is basically about getting introduced to the subject. Okay, VLSI theory and design, and because this whole VLSI is dependent upon mostly one device, and that device name is MOSFET. Okay, the whole VLSI industry is standing on this device, MOSFET. That is metal oxide semiconductor field effect transistor. Okay, so we should be aware about this uh, device. Okay, we should be very well accustomed about this device, that how does it operates, what is the working principle behind it, and how can it be used in an analog circuit or in a digital circuit. Okay, so we should be clear about the operation of this single device. Okay, if you are clear about this functioning, then this subject will become easy to understand for you. Okay, uh, then in module 2 again, some circuits, basic circuits are introduced, and one of the most basic circuit that is made of MOSFET is an inverter. Okay, okay, so this inverter circuit is made from MOSFET device. Okay, and the other big circuits, okay, would be made by using these smaller circuits, gates like inverters, AND gate, NOR gate, okay, XOR gate, XNOR gate, and like that. So we would see about the basic circuit for inverter and its characteristic, and how does it behave, and what are the important characteristic, that is switching characteristics of inverters, and some delay time definition, that what is propagation delay and how to calculate those things. Okay, so basically most of the thing would be related to inverters in module 2. In module 2, so this is like we will get introduced to the device here in module 1. Okay, along with some other design principles obviously, and then we will get introduced to the basic inverter, okay, and its characteristic in module 2. And in module 3 we will see different types of combinational MOS circuits. Okay, so now we are going from low scale to high scale. First the device here, second the basic inverter, and here then some bigger circuits. Okay, so we will see the pass transistor logic, that how to design the circuits using pass transistor logic. Then we will also see the sequential circuits, that the circuits that contain a memory part. Okay, how to construct the latch, how to construct flip-flop circuits, how to construct edge trigger flip-flops. Okay, and we will see what are the dynamic logic circuits. Okay, their principles and what is the difference between dynamic and other logic circuits. Basically, different types of logic circuits which are being used to manufacture an IC, integrated circuit chip. Okay, we will see different types of logic families in module 3. Okay, and then module 4 we will see again, we will go one more uh, step up, we will go one more level up. Okay, and we will see the system designs. A system will contain all the things that are required to function properly. Okay, so system means a complete setup that contains okay. So there was a power cut here in the college, so I am not, I am now connected with my mobile data. Okay, I hope it is visible to all. Meanwhile, you can ask your doubts either by voice, or you can also give your doubts in the chat box. Okay. Okay, so I was here. Then we will see in the module 4 the system based methodologies. Okay, the different design strategies. So we are going from the low level to high level. Okay, we started with the device, then came to the circuit, and then here in module 4 it is about the system, whole system. Maybe a good example of a system is a chip. Okay, the chip that contains everything and it works, it satisfies some functioning. Then we will see the different languages that can be used to design these systems. One of those language is VHDL. Okay, and we will also see okay, we will also see some tools. Okay, like given by Xilinx. Then there's something called as IRSIM. Then we will see what is this open source packages, GOSPL. Okay, we will see some of these tools. And then the last part is about testing. Okay, the design verification and testing. So after creating a design, we need to test it. We need to test it that whether the design is working properly or not. Okay, so for this we perform simulation. Okay, and after this simulation is called as verification, and after verification uh, we go for the testing part. Okay, we'll see what are the different strategies that are used for the design verification and testing. Okay, and but here you keep in mind that this design verification is different and design testing is different. Okay, okay, testing is done after verification. Verification means simulating the things. Okay, testing is a bit different from verification. These two are different techniques. We will see this thing and what are the different models that are used for testing, and the different design strategies for testing chip level, system level, and these different techniques we will see. And in the last module it is about memory. Okay, about SRAM, DRAM, ROM, then serial access memory, content addressable memory, then about FPGA. Okay, although FPGA is not memory, but it contains memory inside it. So we will see. So more or less, I have realized that the syllabus is big. Okay, the syllabus is huge for this VLSI theory and design part. Okay, uh, I, I I would like to ask that do you know that earlier who uh, taught this subject? Do you have an idea? Last year or maybe before that? Last year, who took this subject? Do you know the faculty name? No one is responding. Tell me yes or no, whatever. At least respond something so that I can be sure that you are listening to me. Otherwise, how would I know? No one is responding. So what should I assume? Students, are you listening?
No, sir, no, we don't know who is the faculty before.
Okay, okay, no issue. Just I am asking this simply. Okay, so this was the overview about the syllabus about this VLSI, about this subject VLSI theory and design. Okay, and do you have lab for this subject in the semester? Do you have VLSI lab? I think it will not be there, or it may be there. I'm not sure.
Sir,
Have
it
you
is not
seen?
in the
No,
timetable.
sir.
No, no.
No, sir, it is not in the timetable.
Okay, okay, right. ठीक है, no issue. So this was about the syllabus. Okay, that we will try to cover. And keep in mind, the syllabus is big. The syllabus is very big. Okay, because I am also teaching this subject in my department, and when I compare this syllabus with our department syllabus, the syllabus this one is a little vast. Okay, but anyways, no issues. We will cover the syllabus. Okay, and about the books, you can download this Kang. Okay, and Rabe. Okay, this is available on internet. I think this is available for download on internet, the soft copy, the PDF copy. Okay, so you can download this one, the textbook number 1 and reference book number 1. Okay, and you can also search for this reference book number 2, that is the Giger VLSI design techniques for analog and digital circuits. See if you can find out the latest edition for this book. uh, this I think the latest edition is maybe about 2000, maybe from 2010. Okay, if you are able to find out 2010 edition PDF version for this book, then you tell me. Okay, but mainly we will follow this one, textbook number 1 and reference book number 1. Okay, so I would start like, because this is the first class. Okay, so I will not go straight forward into the syllabus. Okay, do you have an idea that what is this subject about? uh, what are you going to learn about the things here in VLSI design? What is the aim of VLSI, whether it's a digital VLSI or analog VLSI? What is the ultimate objective? Yeah, students, and be frank to interact with me. Okay, I would like to hear queries and answers from you. Okay, the answers may be correct or incorrect, it does not matter as long as you are participating here. Okay, so you participate here with your with your open mind. No idea?
No, sir, no idea.
Okay, Okay, so I will give an example. The laptops, the mobile phones, and other sophisticated gadgets. Okay, they contain processors, chips. Your laptop is containing maybe this Intel i3, i5, or i7 processor chips. Mobile phone also contain these kind of similar chips by Qualcomm or MediaTek or from other companies. So these chips, okay, they are the product of this VLSI industry. The microprocessor in the uh, desktop or in the laptop is a product of this VLSI industry. Okay, this is one example. Okay, there are various other kinds of chips. Okay, microprocessor is just one example of a kind of chip. But apart from this, there are various kinds of chips for various kinds of applications. There may be a different chip for some DSP application. There may be a different kind of chip for some communication application. Okay, like that. So ultimately, the aim is to manufacture some sort of chip. Okay, I hope you are aware of the chip. Okay, you have used these chips earlier in your labs, in your basic electronics labs. If you have done that, okay. Remember, there was a chip for a digital experiment. Okay, that was related to the gates 7400, 7402 something, 7404, 7412, like that, if you remember. So one of the chips was for NAND gate, one of the chip was for OR gate, one of the chip was for inverter, and one of the chip was for an XOR gate, right? Do you remember those chips? Hmm?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So those chips, those are also called chips. Okay. But the chips that I refer here, that I have given the examples, like the chips that are there in your mobile phones or laptops, they are huge in the sense that the number of components, the number of circuits, or the number of devices that they contain, that number is huge. Okay, for example, okay, I can tell you that Intel microprocessor chip, the latest Intel microprocessor chip, okay, that contains more than 1 billion number of transistors. Okay, more than 1 billion number of transistors. This the latest microprocessor chip. Okay, whereas the chip that you have used in your basic electronics lab, that was for basic gates. Okay, that contains a few number of transistors. Okay, that was also a chip, and processor is also a chip. The difference is in the number of, in the difference is in complexity, that is in the number of devices that they contain. Okay, this is the only difference here. The In sophisticated chips, the number of transistors or the number of devices is huge, the complexity of the circuit is huge, whereas this complexity is less in the case of those 7400 or 7402 kind of chips, which contain a few, number of gates. Okay, but for understanding purpose, you can relate those things. Okay, so what I'm trying to say here is that the also we have different kinds of chips we can have for memory. Okay, like SRAM, DRAM. We have RAM. We have RAM chips. RAMs are installed in our laptops, desktops. Okay, they are also coming in the form of chips. Okay, then if you have heard about this FPGA. Okay. Then these FPGAs are also a kind of chips that contain some circuitry which can be used by the programmer to program and display some functioning. So there are various kinds of chips that are available in the market for various applications. Okay, and this is the ultimate aim of VLSI, that is to design a particular circuit and get it fabricated. So you have some sort of specification, you have some sort of functioning in your mind. Okay, I would like to do this thing, but how would I do? I would like to do this thing with the help of some electronic circuit. Okay, so first we specify the specifications. Okay, this should be the area. Okay, and this should be the input, this should be the output, this should be the speed, this should be the power consumed by the circuits, and many different aspects they would comprise as specification. And with that specification set, we go for the designing part. Okay, you do the coding, then perform verification, and then synthesis, and then static timing analysis, and those different steps are involved. So we basically design that circuit with the help of some tool. Okay, and after following different steps that are there, we go to the last step and we generate a GDS2 format file. That GDS2 file can be sent to a foundry for manufacturing. Okay, so what they will do, they will charge something. They will take your GDS2 file and will fabricate it for you for some charge. Okay. That is their work, to fabricate chips. So you will get your chips like this. This is the whole process. Okay. So there are specific industry also for the designing part and for the fabrication part, right? Uh, like this, you might have heard about Qualcomm, MediaTek, and AMD, like ARM processors. So these are some of the companies which are involved in the designing part. Okay, but there are also some sort of dedicated industries which are only involved in the fabrication of chips. So all of these designing companies, okay, get their design chip fabricated by some sort of foundry. The foundry is a company that fabricate those chips. Okay, so like we have TSMC, we have Global Foundries. Okay, those are the kind of companies which are only involved in the fabrication of chips. Which are controlling this kind of industry actually. Okay, that's a different matter, but this is the whole scenario. Okay, so since this is the basic VLSI subject, so we will not go very much deep into the topics, but we will try to understand the functioning of each of these topics, and try to relate each of these, and try to imagine, try to get an idea that how the things are working, how can we proceed if we have some kind of idea in our mind that okay, this is the idea, this is the function that I want to get fabricated on a chip. So I should have an OOE that okay, what are the steps that I would need to follow for getting my chip. Okay, so this is the whole view of this VLSI design subject. Okay, so from here, any doubts, anything till now? Because I will start with the introduction part. Okay, and we will go through the topics. Let's say let's start the module 1 with the first topic about introduction. Okay, Like VLSI is a term that stands for very large scale integration, right? Okay. So it stands for a very large scale integration. Integration means to add the things, right? And this addition is done on a very large amount, very large scale. Okay. And this is all about the integration of components, the integration of transistors, basically. Okay. And mind it, whatever kind of chip it is, ultimately at the bottom part, at the fundamental part, there will be a transistor sitting there. Okay. So the transistor is the fundamental device on which the whole circuit is designed. Okay, the circuit may be any kind of complex circuit, but when you break it down and go to the bottom part, you will find transistors sitting there. Okay, so it is all about integrating more and more and more number of transistors on a single given area chip, right? So it is about manufacturing large number of components in a given area. Okay, in a given area. Okay, so all these new generation chips that come from time to time. Okay, that is from, let's say earlier we had Pentium chips, then we had dual core chips, then core 2 duo chips, then we have now i3, i5, i7, i9 chips, given by Intel. So a newer generation chip, a new chip contained always more number of transistors from the previous kind of chip. Okay, so a lot more number of transistors or more number of components as compared to its previous version. Okay, this is what is happening actually. So the main target of integrated circuit design or VLSI design, okay, integrated circuit stands for IC. Okay, the main target of IC design and fabrication is to achieve more functionality at higher speed using less power, less area, and low cost. Okay, so we want to achieve more functionality. The circuit becomes more and more complex. Okay, we want to incorporate more and more complex circuit onto the chip. Okay, and at the same time we want it to operate at higher speed, consume less power, consume less area, and the operating cost should be low. Okay, these are the things that we want, that we desire actually. But you remember one thing, that all of these things cannot be met in a single chip. Okay, so out of these 3 or 4 parameters, you achieve 1 or 2 parameter, and you go down on other parameters. Okay, so there is a trade-off between these parameters. When there is improvement in 1 or 2 parameters, there would be a degrade in the remaining parameter. So this is how it works. So we should be sure about that. What do we want? Do we want to achieve higher speed? Do we want, or power is our main goal, or area is the main goal? Suppose if the area is main goal, then we would like to reduce area more and more, right? Then we may not focus on its speed and power if the primary concern is area. Okay. Similarly, there are applications for which the primary targets are different. Some application may require higher speed. Some application may require less number of power consumption, especially those uh, equipments which are operating on batteries. We would like to consume we would like it to consume less and less power. So there, okay, and also we would like it to consume less area. So there, higher speed may not be a thing to worry about. The more important thing is to make it less power consuming. So like that, the design will go on. Okay. So like that, we have different main parameters for different kinds of applications. Okay. So this is a chronology about the evolution of transistors. For example, in year 1958, the single transistor was invented. Okay, and the level of integration was nothing. Okay, then in 1960, the first monolithic IC was formed that contained, and we say that the level of integration was just one. Okay, in 1962, a multifunction IC came that contained somewhere between 2 to 4 number of transistors. That is still very few transistors. Then similarly in 1964, some more complex function ICs came that contain around somewhere between 5 to 20 number of transistors. Okay. So as the time progressed, the complexity or the level of integration also became more and more. And here somewhere around 1967, the MSI era came. MSI stands for medium scale integration. Okay, that contains around 20 to 200 number of transistors. Okay, number of components. Then after MSI, this LSI came, large scale integration that contain somewhere between 200 to 2000 number of components. Then in 1978, we had VLSI, okay, that contain 2000 to 20,000 number of components. Okay. Then we see that, okay, in 1989, ULSI, ultra large scale integration came. So these are the terms that are being given time to time to show that the complexity has increased to a certain new level. Okay. So above 20,000 number of components, those kind of chips are called ULSI chips. But somehow, okay, sorry. Somehow this term VLSI became popular. It remained popular. So still we are using the same term VLSI for the current new generation of chips also, because it became and remained popular and popular among the public, among the designers, among the engineers. Okay, so they thought that, okay, why to use ULSI and GSI, giant scale integration? Somehow VLSI term remained in their minds. Okay, and still we are using this term VLSI. Okay, so this is the evolution of uh, the ICs with right from the 1950s to 1990, and yes, we are having, like I told, we are having the kind of chips. For example, these processor chips which contain more than 1 billion number of transistors. Okay. Okay, and this shows a part of Babbage's difference engine that was built in 1832, and this is the first automatic calculator. Okay, and this was a mechanical calculator that contained mechanical parts. So it required around 25,000 mechanical parts at a total cost of 17,470 pounds, and that too in 1834. So you can imagine that what was the cost. The cost was huge. It was around 17,000 pounds in 1834. So how much cost it would be in the current time? We can just imagine. Okay, it may run into crores of pounds. So that was too costly. Okay, and also since it contained mechanical parts, So remember, whenever something contains mechanical parts, okay, then there is a boundation on the speed, the top speed at which we can operate it. Okay, since it contains mechanical parts, so obviously the speed at which we can operate it would be not that very high as compared to the electronic parts or electronic based calculators, where the movement of electrons play an important role. Okay, but here the movement of different components were the main reason behind the calculation, and since they are moving mechanically, okay, so we expect that these cannot be operated at a very high speed as compared to electronic parts, electronic components. Okay, but although this was the first uh, known automatic calculator that was developed by Babbage. Okay, that was in 1832. Okay, and just to give an idea that okay, we started with the mechanical things, and then we moved on to the electronic things. Why? Because of uh, obvious advantages in terms of size, okay, in terms of cost, and in terms of speed, right? So since this was huge, okay, it was it was very big in size. Okay, it was costly. Okay, it was slow. So naturally, uh, researchers and engineers were looking for some alternative solutions that can be smaller in size, the cost can be reduced, that can be cheaper, and that can operate something that can operate at a higher speed. Okay, so there was a natural solution for that. At that time, some electrical, because this transistor was operated. अभी तो क्लास मैं आज जल्दी खत्म कर दूंगा। क्या क्या बोल रहे हैं? हाँ, अभी 5-10 मिनट में प्लान है आपका? हाँ, अच्छा अच्छा, जाने के लिए बोल रहे हैं आप? लोग निकलिए, मैं क्लास ले रहा हूँ, थोड़ा टाइम। ओके, सो because at that time in 1830s, the devices like the transistors and MOSFETs were not being developed fully, so the research was going on. So naturally, when they were developed in 1940s and 50s, then they took over the mechanical solutions. Okay, so electrical solutions became more popular as compared to mechanical. Okay. So the invention of the transistor was in 1947. Okay, this is the first picture of the invented transistor, I think. Okay, you may not be able to relate this, but it is the picture. Okay, okay, and it was invented by Shockley, Bardeen, and Brattain. Okay, they were working at Bell Labs. Okay, and for the invention of this transistor, they were awarded Nobel Prize. Okay, they shared Nobel Prize for the invention of BJT, and the invention occurred in the year 1947. Okay, so now you can imagine that. Okay, now we all the things are operating on on these kind of transistors, whether MOSFET or BJT. So at that time, the people were aware that okay, the invention of BJT will embark a new era of computing, and recognizing this fact, they were they were awarded the Nobel Prize. This Shockley, Bardeen, and Brattain. Okay, so this was a very important invention of that time, right? And based on this thing, the single transistor IC was introduced in 1958. This was developed by Jack Kilby, that was working at Texas Instruments, and I think this may be the image. Okay, the image is just for reference. You may not be able to understand anything from the image, but I have given that just for reference, that how does the things were at that time. Okay, and how have they changed. Okay, then invention of CMOS logic gates, 1963, something like this maybe. Then the first microprocessor. The first microprocessor from Intel was Intel 4004. Okay, that came in 1970. That contained around 2300 number of transistors. Only 2300 number of transistors. And that operated at 740 kilohertz clock frequency. And this one, okay, is the image. And now we have VLSI chips that contain more than 20,000 number of, anything that contain more than 20,000 number of devices would be categorized as a VLSI chip. Okay, looks something like this. Okay, so the technology have moved from this to this to this to this, you know, picture wise. Okay, so this is also giving the evolution of these ICs. Okay, I hope you're listening, students. Okay, so more recently we have this term ULSI and GSI. Okay. And you might have also heard about this term SoC, the system on chip. Okay, the whole system is fabricated on a single chip. Okay, for example, microcontroller. A microcontroller is an example of SoC. Okay, the whole thing, the whole required components are there on a single chip. Okay, so a single chip is capable of showing a full functionality. Okay, so this is becoming more and more popular, and there are other kinds of chips also that come under this category, system on chip. It means that the whole system is fabricated on a single chip. Okay, so this became popular in 2000, after 2000. Okay, okay, so this was about the introduction part, and this is giving the giving an idea about the economic thing. Look at here. So right from 1975, when around which the first microprocessor was introduced, so till 1990 and 2000, 2002, in terms of dollar, in billions of dollar. Look at how the industry has grown, how the market has grown for this electronic chips. Okay, so right from 4, 6, so it is growing like this. It is growing non-linearly. Look at this shape. Okay, so it is estimated to be around 288 or 300 billion dollar in 2000. This is the data about 2000. So now we are 20 years ahead. So in 2022, it may be in trillions of dollar. Okay, so the thing is that the market is huge. The demand and supply, the supply demand is huge, and so the market supply is also there, and hence the industry is also huge. And since all the things are becoming electronic, now earlier we had just computers, now we had mobile phones, now we are seeing the different medical equipments that are being that are using these electronic things. And then next, this wearables are coming. Now we are using smart watches, okay, and smart devices are there. They are also using some sort of chips inside those things. So the market is increasing, and as a result of the continuously increasing integration density and decreasing unit cost, the semiconductor industry has been one of the fastest growing sectors in the worldwide economy. Okay. And since this and all of these things become like they are interrelated. Okay, the demand is high continuously. uh, if the demand is high, then obviously the market would be huge. Okay, and when the production increases, obviously the cost decreases. Okay, and the industry grows. Okay, and this is how it has happened. Okay. Okay. Just I will cover these things. So this is showing about industry trends. Like earlier we had personal computers, then consumer electronics, then communication came. Okay, then portable computers or laptops came, then multimedia applications came around 1990s. In 1990s, okay, 2000, then network computers. Then right now we have this thing becoming very popular, the speech processing, the image processing part, or image recognition, face recognition. These things are becoming popular. Okay, and then video on demand. You can this internet. Okay, like you can see whatever video you want on your mobile phone, either on demand or it is there. You can just go and download, and you can watch those things. Okay, so these are all becoming more and more real time with time. Okay, so these are some of the major, wide applications that have came out with time. So basically, earlier it used to be large, centralized, and expensive things, and with time it grew into kind of small, portable, and distributed and inexpensive devices. Like we have small smartwatches that are obviously portable and small, inexpensive, not that costly. Okay, then we have different kind of sensors out there that can be used, that can be placed, and this IoT is coming. Internet of Things are coming. So this IoT will mainly use the sensors, okay, to sense different kinds of data and to manipulate those things. Okay, right? Then these are just for introduction part. Okay, so some examples. For example, Intel Pentium 4 microprocessor that was developed with 0.13 micrometer process or 130 nanometer process. Okay, this is a kind of technology. If it is 0.13 micron process or 0.13 micron technology, it means that the smallest size transistor would be around 0.13 micrometer. The smallest transistor size would be around this, that is present in this chip. It contains around 55 million transistors, 10 lakh crores, around 5.5 crore number of transistors. Just this is about Pentium 4. It operated at around 2.4 gigahertz clock frequency, and the area that it contained was about 145 mm square. There's one more example from IBM S390 microprocessor that was again fabricated with the same technology, that is 0.13 micrometer CMOS process, that contains 7 layers of metal interconnect. That metal interconnect was made up of copper. Okay, so these are the main data that you may not be able to understand completely, but just for reference, just for getting some idea, I have uh, I have inserted these things here. Okay, and this contain around 47 million transistors. Okay, operated at around 1 gigahertz clock, and the area was around 180 millimeter square. And these are the old chips. Pentium 4 was around 20 years back, right? Now we have present day microprocessor chips that contain more than 1 billion number of transistors. Okay, this is huge. Just try to imagine. Just try to imagine how much. And the actual size of a microprocessor that we are using in our laptop, if you have seen this thing, you would agree that the actual size does not grow bigger than this. This is the actual size. I think this is big. This I have drawn somewhat bigger than the actual size. So this is the actual size of the microprocessor that we are using inside our laptops or desktops. Okay, it may be a little bit smaller than this. Okay, but not bigger than this. So this much area contain more than 1 billion number of transistors. So now you imagine what is kind of technology, what is the sophistication there. Okay. Okay, so this is the last slide that I will refer for today's class. It's fine. So there is a very famous law that is known as Moore's law. Moore's law. Okay. So Moore was a person that founded okay, in the 1960s. Gordon Moore. Okay. Then with Fairchild Corporation, he was working at Fairchild Corporation, and later co-founder of Intel. He also founded the company Intel. He predicted that the number of transistors that can be integrated on a single die would grow exponentially with time. Okay. So a die is a small area of silicon on which the components are fabricated. Okay. So he also formulated that the complexity will double approximately every 1 to 2 years, or some people say that the complexity doubles around every 18 months. That is, I can say that every 18 months the number of components become double. Okay, the number of components becomes just 2 times every 18 months, every 18 to 20 months. Okay, so the rise is exponential, huge. Look at here, right from 1970s to 2000. Okay, the number of transistors per chip. Okay, for example, this is the case of microprocessor, the lower line. Okay, so in 1970 it contained around something few thousand number of transistors, and in around 2000 it contained around, like, look at here, around 50-60 million number of transistors. So this is the increase like this, and these are the different microprocessors that came in like 8085, the a very popular basic microprocessor that every student I think studies. Okay, 8085, 8086. So 8085 came something around came in around 76 or something. Then 8048, 8086, Pentium 80286, like this. Then Pentium came here. Okay, then we have, because Intel had been releasing microprocessors time to time. Okay, so the point that is to be observed here, that is the increase in the number of transistors with time. Okay, the look at the slope, look at this thing. In 1970s, it contained few thousand of transistors. In around 2000, it contained around 60, 70 million number of transistors. Okay, and this is the rate of growth. And if you calculate it, the average would be coming around this data as predicted by as predicted by Moore. So he was right in predicting that the complexity will get doubled approximately every 1 or 2 years, or approximately every 18 months. Okay, and this uh, growth of complexity was even more aggressive for the case of memory. There was microprocessor chips. There are also memory chips. Okay, for example, RAM chips. RAM are example of memory. So the rate of increase was 1.5 per year for the case of memory. Okay, and for the case of microprocessor, it was 1.25 times per year. Right. So this is just to give you an idea about the industry. Okay, and basically this is all about chips and the number of transistors, the number of components that we can fabricate on a single chip. Okay, so this was the introduction and some historical data about VLSI, that how did it start, and what was the progress done in the previous years. Okay, and then we will see about we will start with the layers of abstraction in the next class. Okay, so tell me if you have any doubts from this today's class. I have just started the introduction part. Okay, if you have any doubts, you can ask. And about attendance, what you can do is you can write your roll number. Okay, you can write your roll number and name in the chat box and give. You write your roll number, type your roll number and name, and send it in the chat box. I will take it as the attendance for today's class. Okay, and if you have any doubt, then you can ask. All of you, please give your attendance in the chat box. Write your roll number and name. Okay.